Hello everyone and welcome to my oil painting class. And today we're exploring how we can paint the moving clouds and their shadows in a landscape. I've taken this photo in the Peak District, walking one of the winter days, but it looks lovely and sunny. We've got some lovely greens, although it is a winter. Bold, exciting blue on the sky. Husband is there, he's quite cold, got a hat on. You can paint the figure if you wish, but it's okay if you don't include the figure at all. I quite like the square composition as it is. So I've got my board as a square. I used a darker violet background because of those dark shadows, which I think we can support ourselves by having a darker background, and we can bring some light in our picture straight away. Right, so on my palette, I have some white, buff titanium, cadmium yellow, ochre, cadmium orange or cadmium red, um, magenta or ruby, either kind of pink type of red, violet, Payne's grey, and then I also have emerald green, cerulean or cobalt blue, and ultramarine. Now I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine and a hint of Payne's grey to do my sketch. The reason for it, I want a slightly darker color to show through. I'm just going to test it out if we can see it. Yes, we can see that. To show through later on. And blue ultramarine probably will be a nice neutral color. So I'm mixing almost like an indigo. Okay. As I'm going to start sketching, let's have a look at our composition. Now, so if this is the top of my picture, this is the bottom. So let's find elements like sky. Okay. I've got a very shallow area for the ground where the figure is. Okay. And there is a slightly flatter, so there is a drop after this little ridge. There's a drop down. There's the base of the valley, which is quite flattish area somewhere here. And then we've got the hill going up. Okay. So almost we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 little areas here. Okay. That's my 4. So what I'm going to do here, my sky and the large space of the hill and the plateau could be one unit. So the 2 and 3 could be done planned together, and then just a little bit of space left for the ground. That's might be my starting point. Okay, so how much of that sky? Probably the sky is going to be looks like almost a third into our picture. Okay, if I were to plan it as a approximate third, yeah, approximately there. Okay, and then within those 2 areas, we'll divide it again. There's approximately, there is a hedge or road there, and the lines are not quite straight through, but they almost kind of creates those layers. Okay, so now I know approximately where those spaces are going to be. I'm going to start looking for the actual lines. Now the border between the peak here and the sky, we have a little bit of a higher point somewhere just off center, and then it just gently drops down, and then again just gently drops down, maybe just gently goes up. Okay, my stroke is a bit wide. I just wanted a thinner line. Okay, I'll just use a little more turbs first. Right, then my grasses, you can see again the figure is standing in a slightly wider part of the grasses, and then it gets slightly narrower towards the right. Okay. And instead of putting this middle area, this is more for our understanding really. I want to play with perhaps the shadow of the cloud as one of the lines, because that will give me the terrain of the slope here. Something drops down, okay, where that almost higher point is going to be. We wanted to exaggerate some of the curves, that's quite nice as well. And then there is this higher point, and then the shadow is finishing, but we can see the colors in the landscape are changing. Okay. Also within that dip, we can see even more of a darker V shape, which will give us some sort of connection, well, recognition of erosion between those hills. And we can see the river coming towards us. Yeah, something's happening there. Okay, I'm not sure if it's the right length, if it's the right curvature. I'm just planning it a little bit first. Okay, maybe a little bit shorter. We can play it after. It's not a big deal. But what it gives me this corner extra darker. Okay, this makes me think where that extra darker corner is going to be. And also from that river zigzagging here, it gives me an opportunity to see the terrain again, how the hill is going up and then flattens, how the hill is gently going up and then how it flattens. We can start tracking some of the farmer hedges, borders, stone walls, divisions of the fields. Okay. And I'm not interested to track them all, but some of the key lines might be quite helpful. Okay, good. Now I'm going to look at my shadow. So as we focus on our shadow, so all of this area is going to be in a shadow. Let's find this hill, and where it's almost like bordering, there's another lovely little wall, and the shadow is almost just crossing it. So I might find that wall here first. Find it diagonal. Okay, how it slopes. Find some of the other lines going alongside the hill of those farmer lands. Okay, maybe not as zigzagging, but okay, approximate directions here for us. And that's where I'll know my shadow from the cloud is going to be somewhere about here. I can play with it after. Okay, any other connective white or dark lines which will give me the terrain. Some of the heather been cut or burned over the years, or different plants growing and different shapes of those lovely brown patches, like a quilt growing alongside of the slopes. Okay, just looking a little bit more at that variety of the line. Maybe a tiny bit more wider here. Okay, so it's something I'm playing with, exploring a bit more. Okay. And it looks like our river zigzags, and after a final bend, we can see there are more trees coming up that way across. I think that's where our river is coming in. Okay, and then that flatness of the plateau. Okay, somewhere here, it's probably where that river is again, or this part of the river meets the main body. Okay, so we've got groups of trees here, and then it turns again, and we see the trees coming towards us slightly wider, bigger in size. And it's maybe a little bit too close here. So this one could drop down. And some of these fields and trees. Maybe even closer here. Okay, something's going to happen here. So I'm looking for some of the directions of the farmland borders. It gives me exciting connections. Some of the lines quite pale, some of the lines quite dark and strong. Okay, so this part of the river behind the trees got a slightly bendy line as well. There's another something else going across. Now those becoming much more less important lines, so we could go more and find more details, or we can keep them much more simplified. There's a village somewhere here. So I'm more interested in some of the key divisions here. Right, if you'd like to put a figure, now it will be a good time, or at least to try. You can always paint the figure over. Okay, I'm going to pick up a tiny bit more darker color. And I'm going to look for silhouette. So the head of the figure is approximately within that bend of the river. So I might start planning an overall silhouette as a shape. Okay, got a backpack, got shoulders, got a hood probably there as well. Maybe one arm is bent and that backpack is there. Okay. Looking at the landscape, I think if I were to turn, if I make the head slightly higher on the right, looks like it will be turning the head away. Instead of looking that way, maybe looking this way. Okay. And then the shadows on the legs from the backpack and the legs more or less standing straight. Feet, shadows. Okay. Looks like he's a little bit leaning for some reason on my drawing. Might just need to make the legs a little bit more close together. No falling figure. Okay. Maybe slightly wider arm there. So when we're working with a silhouette, it's much easier to make those amendments and changes because we're looking for that shape rather than definition of hands, pockets, exact shoes. Okay, think it's also on my screen because the boat goes this way slightly. It's harder to see them. Okay, somewhere there. Good. Right, one more thing, our clouds. We've got 3 layers of clouds. We've got a very, very large cloud overhanging, quite dark. We can only see its shadow. Second layer, we can see most of the cloud here. We can see the shadow, we can see the light of it, yeah. Partially it's overlapped here. Then we see the clouds which are behind the hill. So they are not sitting on top of the hill, they're behind because we're quite high up. We can see that 3rd layer. So again, you can on the side even plan how much space that's going to take. So perhaps my shadow will be almost, if not quite as halfway through, maybe a little bit less than a halfway through of the sky space, at least here on the right. And I'm going to leave quite a small space for the low area. Now I'm looking at that pointy part of my hill because I have made it slightly more raised than on the photo to get a nice effect. So if this area, so my middle cloud and top cloud got almost horizontal line for them, okay? So we see that base. So if we explore that will give us a good vision of that cloud. So maybe that one somewhere here. Okay, getting slightly larger, bit of blue sky will be seen here, and then it's all covers with a shadow. And let's find my shadow cloud. And the shadow cloud stops, perhaps somewhere here. And it just borders with a lighter one. And then for the lower level, that 1, 2, 3, 3rd layer close to the ground behind the hill, there will be quite a small scale. So because they're quite white, I don't want to draw too much dark outlines for them. I might just find a little bit of gaps where we can see a fresh blue sky somewhere there. Right, and I think on this I'm going to stop with my drawing. Let's give you a little bit of time to finish it off. And then we'll start painting our sky as a first area. Right, to paint the sky, I'm thinking of painting the sky because we've got that that's one group of colors of blues and grays, and it's the lighter stones in this area as well for the highlights in them. And then we can focus on that lovely group of greens and warm colors for the browns, okay? And if we were to squint our eyes, the lower part of the painting is slightly darker than the top one, okay? Because of that overwhelming amount of white. So I think starting with the sky might be a good idea. Right, so I'm going to use a filbert brush, medium size. I'm going to start with painting the blues. So I'm going to go for my white. I'm going to start with painting some paler blue sky between the clouds next to my peak. I'm going to go for some cerulean with some white. Now, against our dark background, it will look quite white, but we can compare it as we go higher, that it will have a color, maybe tiny bit back to stronger cerulean. So let's just block some of the areas. The more color I'll have on my board, the more kind of filling up the areas, the more my camera will start picking up the pigment better. So I'm just mixing a reasonably light to medium darkness of cerulean with some white. Let's find some gaps perhaps here. If we're painting over our sketchy lines and they're quite smudge, there's the smudge into your color, just make sure you just mix it and you stay with a fresh color. Might put tiny bit more of that cerulean here so that blue is varied as well. Okay, some of there. And I'm also looking for exciting shapes, maybe a larger one, maybe a medium one, maybe a smaller groups. Okay, and I can tweak it again as we go. Maybe make something small or adjust it as well. Now, as I'm going higher above the second row of clouds, I'm going to get much thicker paint from cerulean. I just test it here. Okay, maybe even partially. This darkness could be here as well. Now I can see the connection. Quite a dark color here. I think my lower level can benefit from a little bit darker color in a few places. Okay. Right, and any other lower areas next to the cloud silhouette. Don't be scared of painting a little over your lines. Okay. And now I'm going to add some ultramarine to my cerulean. The stronger ultramarine could go towards the top of our painting and something in between. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more darker, so that proportion between cerulean and ultramarine will start increasing towards the ultramarine. Okay, can even test it, putting almost fresh ultramarine. I'd still use cerulean, but maybe much smaller in quantity. Okay, sometimes the bristle skips lighter color, so make sure you do mix it well. Okay. I'm just gonna double check, I'm gonna squeeze all the white paint from the roots of my brush. And also double check that these don't look like halos, they look more of a flat color, but I do love the variety of strokes. So there is a good range of color between the two blues. Okay, might just bring tiny bit more darker color still to my paler low areas and perhaps a tiny bit more lighter tone here. as things are blending through that horizon. Okay, that's better. Good. I can keep this blue brush separate because we might need to come back to it. And I'm going to pick up another brush. Now, maybe slightly bigger, so we can paint our clouds. Now, we tend to start painting the clouds with a dash shadow. So if I were to find this color of the shadow of the close to us cloud, and then paint similar colors for in the small quantities for the shadows for the rest of the clouds, then we can paint highlights after. So let's get some our 3 oils mixture. I can go for my white, but because I've got buff titanium, I'm going to use that one. So if you're using white, you just need to mix white with small amount of ochre, and I'm going to be adding some violet to this anyway, so you will need some violet here as well. So I'm almost kind of skipping one color here, and I'm also saving some fresh white for me for later. So white, ochre, and violet, or buff titanium and a bit of violet. I'm going to put the mark somewhere here. So it will look quite light because I need a tiny bit more violet. And the third color we need is our ultramarine. Make sure it's ultramarine, not cerulean blue. Otherwise, we're going to have a clash with the violet. Right, I'm going to make tiny bit more of my ochre. Okay, and I think some more ultramarine so that balances. That's better. It's getting more. I'm looking into more gray color without extra violet. It was giving me more of a, so without an extra ochre, it was giving me more of a violet color. Okay. Okay, that's much more grayish tone, which can easily go towards the blue and easily can go towards the violet and easily could go towards the ochre, which I'll start doing now. So this block of darkness, that's quite a nice one. I'm going to block my cloud, that darkness of it all, taking my time mixing it. So if I block it all together, okay. And now can I add slightly more blue to that? Okay, and this could be my even more of my shadow. Maybe a tiny bit more violet with it. Just want a darker version of it. So maybe all 3 colors will come. Not too much ochre, but not too much. Yeah, that's balancing it again back. If I would have just used gray, it doesn't quite work the same way. The color of the gray is not going to give you that lovely depth of the color. It'll be much more neutral. Right, can I go a little bit more into the blue now? Okay, so that variety, okay, might just need to lift it up a bit to show you. That variety, that's a little bit more into the violet, that's a little bit more towards the blue. Okay, can I blend it partially here? So we'll just look for the sky for now. Okay, and this one could go just towards a little bit more light. So using buff titanium, or you could have just used a little bit of fresh white. Would have been fine as well. Just gives me a variation within the cloud, okay, of this light. Okay, my brush is getting quite full of paint, so I just need a wipe. Don't want it to be clean. Some of this color could be put back on our palette for later use, perhaps. I could see I could benefit from a little bit of white and some fresher blue introduced into my cloud here in the cloud's shadow. Might just do a little bit of more variation of that paler blue, maybe here in the border, maybe a bit more here so it's not too yellowish. Okay, I need to put something else higher there for you to see it better. Okay, that's better. Only gentle change, but okay. Good. And let's see how this border could also blend into my blue sky. So if I just drag the color out, it starts mixing with my blue, almost as if I've got a transparent cloud here. Okay. My brush has started to split, which means that it's a little bit dry. I might need to change my brush. Or I can add a tiny bit of tips or oil for it to stop splitting. But at the same time, if I'm adding tips or oil, so often lift my paint rather than blend it. Okay, let's keep it as it is for now. You need to use a softening tool of your finger. That's lovely as well. I think that might be enough. Just wanted some more variety of strokes and okay. Right, and now let's have a look at some shadows on my other clouds. I'm going to use the same colors we just had and find the base on my second cloud. Somewhere here. There will be a little bit of darkness here and there, but overall the cloud does look quite white. It's quite a bit of cooler shadow over this area. Yes, somewhere here. So I'm prepping that foundation for it. And I'm also painting over the parts of the blue sky. That gives me a reference point as well, where I can make the base of the cloud slightly darker, perhaps. Okay, without the white, it's harder to see how things are gonna look eventually. But this is our little starting point. I'm gonna do something similar for my lower clouds. Just somewhere close to my patches of blue from the sky. I'm just going to look out for possible shadows. Okay, there will be less white, there will be more in between tones for the lower level of clouds. Okay, so looking a little bit more of a mess. Now I'm going to wipe my brush. I'm not going to make it super clean, just mainly take some of the chunks of paint. Use a bit of tips to take any extra darks, but don't need to clean it perfectly. Now I can use my oil, go for some fresh white, a little bit thicker white. Now if I place direct white first, it might be too strong fresh white, but any of the palette color, just a little bit of, or pale blue, or a little bit of that buff titanium, or a little bit of ochre. One of those colors will be enough. Okay, and I want to block some of the areas here. You go immediately for thick paint, or in between I'm going for a little bit more on a runny side of the paint, just to start introducing that boldness of white. This one's quite a big one because I want the colors to mix together. That's why the softness of the paint comes in before I make my final decisions on applying fresh white in thicker quantities. So it's quite a lot of white staying out here. I need to mingle it a bit better. And that's the base of my cloud, so I need to turn more towards horizontal lines. Okay. And any of the smaller strokes for the clouds at the back will offset the shadow of the cloud above. I need a smaller brush shortly here. Try to paint over most of the surface of the background color for the sky. Okay, now can I follow through that cloud level 2? Yeah, I've got almost a perfect line for it, for its base. Gonna just gently lose it. Okay, and then find it, and then again perhaps partially lose it by smudging it. Okay, so it's there, but it's not as obvious perhaps. Okay. I'll put this brush aside. Yeah, I'm not too sure that I like that it's split in the moment. It hasn't got a lot of paint. So I might move on to using another brush. Now my blue brush could come in and help me out with bringing back some of the cerulean and ultramarine to finalize my shapes, so I can blend the white into the sky, and I can bring the sky color to blend into the cloud as well. Okay. Good, and maybe a little bit more blending into. And perhaps even gently finding more of that sky, even if it's not there. Across. Maybe a tiny bit more of the blue, slightly darker version of my cerulean. Okay, so playful borderline. Any subtones using slightly muckier color from the palette. Just bringing a little bit more medium darknesses to my whites. You can always put some extra fresher whites because that gorgeous, lovely light will be supporting all the greens and the highlights, and those shadows from these clouds will be so exciting. Right, just double checking the silhouette of my hill, of my mountain, of my peak. Okay. So when I start painting, I have got enough sky, or if I need to bring it a little more precise. Okay, the painting reflects and reveals its shapes. Just looking for some of the directional strokes here as well. Right, can I put any fresh white on my clouds while I'm here? Might just bring a couple of extra strokes as a chunk of paint. Okay, the paint is quite runny on my board, so it doesn't want to stay where I'm placing it. This may be the case because the brush bristles still have enough kind of enough liquids from turbs and oils, so till I really squeeze it out, it might not stay on the board. Right, I want a little bit more fresher strokes of white somewhere here. Smaller scale strokes for the clouds behind the hill. The scale of them is getting smaller as well. Keep topping up my white. Also, if we're painting big area, we don't like something, because it's a similar group of colors, you can just take a palette knife and wipe an area off and then continue painting instead of applying more and more paint. Sometimes that's an easier solution, it's quicker solution. You're not kind of over painting the certain elements. Okay, this is getting more exciting. perhaps tiny bit of something paler in this corner as well. I just need a little bit more thicker white. Okay. Right, let's perhaps stop at that. And let's have a look what we can do for the lower part of the painting. That's quite nice and chunky way of painting our sky. Right, next part. I'd like to paint now the highlights on the land, starting from some of those browns to lighter greens and much lighter top parts of the grasses here. I'm going to leave the shadows and use my surface of the current primer of the board as it is. Larger brush will be better, so we can have a quick coverage, but quite a big coverage. I'm also going to, just to keep my palette on the screen, so I'm just going to lift this one off and put another color on. Start using my palette as a fresh one. Right, so with my larger brush, I need to pick up a little more of my oils. So I'm just going to top up my oils as well, as my brush used it quite a lot. Right, so larger filbert brush, quite a lot of oil. I'm going to use my buff titanium as a base. If you don't have it, it will be white and ochre, and I will be using some extra ochre and yellow, so it just kind of gives me that body of the color quite quickly. Okay, and a little bit of cadmium red or cadmium orange. Okay, we'll probably use a small amount of yellow into that. So I'm looking for those warmer colors. Okay. So let's bring, with some larger strokes, some of these highlights. Okay, so I'm looking for, remember how we identified some of the slopes here? And I'm going to start mixing small amount of slightly darker color of this sort. And I just use a tiny bit of violet and ruby. Okay, that's slightly duller, almost like a darker ochre, yeah, but it might have a hint of red in it, a hint of violet in it, so it will be just those marvelous variations we can slowly create as we mix color. Okay, it might go a little bit over Okay, maybe some of this color is going to be exposed. They said, but I think it's more into the reds here. A little bit more into the reds. Maybe a little bit more into the purples. Quite a lot of dark purples. So if I were to mix more, okay, that's gone too pale. Okay, that's quite an interesting one. Maybe a little bit too grayish. I wanted something a bit more warmer. Variation. Okay, so those warm colors could be just gently mixed in together, picking up a little varieties. That's might be my slightly darker heathers coming in. Okay, maybe going slightly more towards the violet as I'm getting towards the tops here. Quite like some of the contrast here, maybe not the black contrast, but maybe slightly still darker for the shadow. So I started with the light and I'm moving into still that top part of the painting is, sorry, part of the peak is lit up. I think if I used my cadmium orange or cadmium red with some violet, I think it will give me a lovely darkness for the tops. Okay, I just merge some of that line so it's not a perfect straight line, not a perfect sharp line. Quite like that darkness. Maybe I'll bring a tiny hint of Payne's gray. Just to keep up with that shadow there. Slightly lighter merge of that brown. I think the direction of my strokes influences how the color appears. Okay, that one comes out quite nicely. Lovely darks. I need a little more of the lighter color. So I'm going to go back to my buff titanium and ochre. And a bit of yellow and a bit of cadmium red. And I think I can go a little back into these areas and have an extra playful mix of color here. That's it. And maybe the border of that light will be charged with extra light. Yeah, so I'm not just outlining the border, but I'm introducing it slightly stronger. Okay. Just looking for exciting strokes, that variety. So I'm not doing anything else different color-wise, or now actually looking for some exciting shapes. Now, can any of my borders of that light, quite like that sharper darkness, a little bit more blend with the sky, a bit of sharper darkness, a little bit lighter, getting a bit more sharper, a bit more of a blend, maybe a little extra light here. If I overdo it, I can always paint my cloud over that area. Yeah, by bringing my fresher white back there, or even paler fresh blue. Okay. Just more images here on the border, so they're not just too consistent. Okay, let's put these two similar strokes. Right. If I'll need more highlights on top of this area, I can always come back to it, but I think that's a nice combination of warm and a little bit more dark on the tops. Let's have a look now at the greens in a similar way. Now you can wipe your brush, but we still will be using some of these ochres and yellows. So if you've got anything left, sorry, if you've got anything on your tissue as you wipe it, we can recycle some of that paint as well. Right, so not washing the brush, just adding more oil to it. I need a little bit of extra white, fresher yellow, so the murkier color of those browns almost will turn my yellow with just only a hint of it. You can see as if I would have used a small amount of ochre. Right, emerald green. So that's very bold pigment from yellow and emerald green. And I might have a small amount of it, or might not have exact color, but slightly duller version of it. So that's where ochre comes in. Whatever that palette color I had here, it will start dulling it down. Tiny bit more green as well. Okay, here we go. So let's paint this bold chunk of light. Might leave an extra hedge or stone wall. Gonna paint close to my trees groups. And the colors will be changing as we'll be moving towards those shadows from the clouds. Okay, so we need to look for the space between the trees and the hedges. And we also need to look for what actually is going to be lighter, darker from our clouds. Easiest way to do is to work perhaps a little more into the lighter greens first, in between the hedges, finding the trees, okay, or certain elements here, and then top up extra highlights and shadows. In some places you might just need to top up the highlights or just the shadows. You can come close to my figure and define the shapes around it as well. A little bit like painting by numbers. Okay, and my light. Okay, just finishing here on the left hand side from the figure. It just kind of bordered here. Maybe I've gone too far with the light, but then it's turns to a shadow. That's okay as long as I spot it. And also next to the head and the right shoulder, here we can see a little more light. Okay, and then we'll start finding that shadow as well. Some of this light is more yellowish. Okay, that's too dark for my yellow. Need a bit more white and a fresher color. Okay, just for now, that will be a good starting point. Okay. Another light color is our grasses at the top, where we have the figure standing. So I can pick up even more white within my paler green. Kind of got that lighter ochre kind of color. We can add a little more darkness to those grasses after. If I dilute my paint gently, I can do some of that texture straight away. Okay. And some of that texture could stay more solid. Okay, that's good. Right, now I'm going to start looking for my shadows color. We've got a lovely dark violet background there already, and it's more or less similar darkness we want to get. So I'm going to continue mixing my greens, making sure that it's has that similar darkness. So I'm going to start with emerald green, and I'm going to help with the darkness from a violet and some ochre. Ochre will keep the color slightly lighter. Just need more green and a little more violet. You can also use some reds as I'll start varying my green. I'll start changing it as well. So let's put it somewhere here on the border. Okay, that's matching with the darkness with my violets, so it means that I'm on the right track. Might start with in-between color. So this was my light, so it's my dark. I mix them gently together. So it'll give me connection of in-between darkness for my left-hand side of the figure. Over corner. Okay, and mixing my reds together with my greens gives me that darker greenish brown. So I'm not going for super darks. It's quite a dark green, but maybe not in the most dark option. Okay. Let's bring this shadow in as well of a similar color. So everything's quite soft so far, yeah. We'll slowly start building it up as deeper shadow. So here we need to do a little softer shadow so that cloud is a little less thicker, more transparent, or a little bit lighter in volume. Okay, and I think something similar need to happen here. Try to use more ochres, reds, rather than just direct whites. White gives a bit more of a washed down color. So if I'll use more intense saturated color with red and ochre and green rather than white, that will be better. That's better already. So once I put a whitish stroke, I need to make sure I paint over it well. Okay, some more big blocks. Maybe this lighter field will show tiny bit of light as it disappears out of light. Okay. Any other borders here before that stream? There is a little bit of a shadow blend, less fresh green here. If I would have been using a smaller brush, I wouldn't be able to do those wider aerial-like shadows. There's a tiny bit of light on the outer side of the stream here before the shadows take over it as well. Okay, any shadows at the front? Maybe there will be some shadows from the trees. Or less perfection into the range of my greens here. Again, it might be just a gentle change from direct light from the sunshine to that surface is changing and the light shines on it slightly different, so that tiny bit of variety of color is more welcome. Okay, just also show how bumpy that surface is, yeah, how it's rises and drops in between. Okay, maybe less perfect here as well next to my figure. Okay. Right, and let's come back to some of the shadows, warmer shadows. So I've got the greener shadows. Let's get some more warmer shadows, violets and some of those browns. So back to some of these colors. Maybe with some of the greens as well. So again, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm going to move to my stronger violet and perhaps my cadmium, sorry, my magenta. So it's kind of a greenish violet here. I wanted a little bit paler color in the first slopes. Okay, tiny bit more paler. Yeah. And perhaps finding anywhere else that little paler color could create a sub pattern. Maybe somewhere around the village. Maybe even some of my trees here by the river. I might just introduce small amounts of it. Kind of that paler warmth. Little yellowish strokes, little ochre strokes, hints of crimson, sorry, or cadmium red. See them, might not see them as much. Okay. Quite nice to have that darker line under those trees, show their widths, how they're developing. So I started from that color and I found it elsewhere. Can I find this color anywhere else? That lovely pale partially shadow color. Again, my brush gets full of paint and ready to be wiped. And then I'm gonna go and top up my violet, oak, and white before I carry on. Right, so let's go for our shadows now. So a bit of extra violet with some of the emerald green. Any of the palette color to make it less transparent. Okay. So the darkness will start changing now. Maybe let's start somewhere on the border where I haven't painted yet, so it will be easier to place the color. It's not going to get smudged. Okay, so these areas will have a bit of extra sharpness as well. I can introduce slightly more violet here. Maybe playing with that curvature of the shadow and where that steeper, more intense shadow is going to be. And then it's going to fill the gaps which are not painted first. Okay. Tiny bit more into the violet than my green. Just flattening some of that there. That's quite a nice variation of colors. Right, let's now from this awkward stretch of a shape turned more to a softer shadow. Going for more violet for those blocks here. Because it's quite a lot of lighter paints. So I keep topping up my violets so my color doesn't lose its darkness. Okay, that's good. And then we can start blending it or spreading it or navigating it within the shapes. So that's going to be a lighter blend. Perhaps some extra lights will come down somewhere this slope. I'm not too sure if I like those as dark, but they're looking lovely as shapes. Okay, right, so we'll look at the other areas. Slope down with our river. Follow it through a little bit. In some places we can see some of its banks of darkness. And then it disappears. Okay, so a little more unity on the strokes here. And then it again gets slightly darker here. Okay. Can be offsetting some of our trees here as well. And any of these shadows, can they creep out slightly more? Good. And any of this light could be also creeping up the other side. So it's not too strong light as a border. Can some of these pointy corners become more softer slopes? I did like that darkness, but maybe not quite the shape it was. Yeah, good. I can see I can put a little bit more light in some of these areas. But we're almost there with the shadows. Okay, any other shadows close to us? I think I can paint this very dark corner of the woodland. And then there's a lovely darkness. Maybe even small individual trees could come up with a smaller brush. And it's quite a chunky brush to be precise, but sometimes it's just good to not overthink it. And this lovely shadow and dip. There might be a group of trees here as well. Page line. Okay, there might be even some trees right under our feet, which is don't see full height of them, just the tops. Okay, I think I'm getting ready to paint a little more details for my grasses at the front and then come back to my highlights. Define more highlights and focus on my figure as well. Okay, a little more Perhaps ochre was in my green here. You want to rub in a little bit of this similar colors we had elsewhere, but leaving the highlighted greens. Okay. Becomes much more natural now. Some sort of flow of the grasses is there, and the texture is different from the trees at the back. So that's important and that's good. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now I just need a little extra light on my landscape now. I'm going to wash my brush, my big brush, and create some highlights, mix some highlight colors. So I'm just using some tips, making sure that chunks of paints are gone. And I'm going to remove my mucky palette with a fresh one. As on my last stages, I can just use this surface now, starting from white. My white is quite chunky and needs some work with oils in it, otherwise it's sticky, gooey, and okay, good. Now let's get some buff titanium, let's get some ochre together. I'm going to start with little highlights on my distant space, maybe a tiny bit of hint of red. Okay, just mixing it well. Okay, and let's place a little bit more bolder. That's enough. I think that would be enough light here. Just slightly sharper light catching that corner. And I put a tiny couple of strokes. I don't think these are strong, but they will create some extra sharpness of light. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more light over these areas. Okay, that's good. Gentle blend so it doesn't look like similar width strokes. Right, let's use the same color in this part because it's quite light. Might just need more ochre in there. Because it's quite light, it will go over the shadows corners stronger. Just clearing some of the space here for that light. It will start picking up my greens below. And mix with the colors below. Okay, little patch of wobble of light of a field. Okay, that's good. Maybe again similar color. Just tiny bit more higher up. And now I'm gonna go for my paler greens. Yeah, that's quite a strong one. I need much more yellowish one. Maybe I do need my cadmium yellow. I thought I might get away with ochre. Okay, so that's a fresher yellow. Tiny bit of emerald green. Gives us lovely saturation of sunshine within the green. If it's too light, if it's a little bit too dark, I can add a small amount of white. Let's put some gorgeous sunshine here. Okay. So this color is lovely, but it could go even better by adding an extra color to it side by side. So then I've got a lighter tone, slightly darker but sunlit, and a shadow. I just put another corner here. So it just shows a terrain very gently. Okay, a little more of that lit up sun. Tiny bit more here. And it's gonna go up the hill as well. Combining some of these colors and blending them with existing shadows. Slopes becoming much more exciting in greens. Okay, again back to tiny bit lighter green next to these yellows. And as they gently blend in together with the current shadow colors here. They started to be part of it. Magic. Okay, all I need to do is tiny bit division of farmland, of farm borders. Okay, I'm happy with that. Can I increase this tiny little bit here? Just a little playful light. Almost like subdivision of light within the shadow. Okay, I'm happy with that now. Good. And the person is working quite well as a silhouette so far as well. What I might do, it's too big brush for it. A hint of gray trousers. I'm just using my existing colors. Bit of violet. Violet and ultramarine. All of that stays light till the shadow comes from back to Payne's gray and some ultramarine. Put a strong cerulean, a little bit of white with cerulean to show the blue jacket. We'll have a lovely connection against the shadows with the connection with the sky. Okay, maybe a little hint of that blue on this side. The rest will be in a shadow blue, ultramarine. And again, gray for the highlights of the backpack. On this side of the hat. Mm. Just painting around the figure, making sure it's got connections between the environment. Okay, any other tiny little highlights? Good Nova. Feel for the space and a little bit of a light on the shoulder. Okay, maybe gone a little too big. Okay. Right, and my tweaks for the hedges. I'm gonna go for my bit of violet, a little bit of green, a little bit of reds, any of those colors with a brush. You can make a narrow strokes. I'm just making it runny, but something I can move and adjust as a play with a line. So I've got my one hedge somewhere here. Got a big space here, but I think I can put another line, although I haven't got it on a photo. And I might even add another one. Okay, any connections between the current shapes I already have? Can I connect some of them? And can I look out for possible others? Looking for the shapes, looking as a reference of possibility of directions. Not going to use them all. And also being careful not to have too similar intensity of line. Okay. Is there a blob of a tree somewhere or a couple of dabs? I think that one I wanted to turn to a tree. As a possibility. Any much darker tones in the silhouette of my hills. Flashing with the head of my figure, but maybe it's okay that shapes are coming through there. Almost there. Just appearance and disappearance of little shapes of trees. Okay, that's maybe a bit too strong. Just simplify that again. Keep it as it is. Right, anything else here? The distance for the river. Okay, the river appears and disappears as well. And it turns. And any of the appearance, disappearance of this sharper border. That's all good. Good. I'm just checking anything else. A bit more tidying up here. Less busy. Gonna continue that diagonal. I think I'm going to stop. Just want to keep that direction a little calmer to narrow down some of these farm base fences, walls. So they're nice and suggestive. Yes, and I think I'm quite happy to stop now. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed exploring our shadows, moving across. I think some of my shadows partially reduced and partially moved more than there in the photograph, but I'm quite happy to have them creeping in and out and changing. That's kind of the beauty of the painting. We adjust it as we go. But I love the space. I quite like how the figure is part of the environment. I love how the clouds support and all that range of greens and browns for the peaks. And I hope you'll continue exploring your work and doing more of your own studies of moving shadows in a landscape. Thank you very much for today, and I look forward to seeing your paintings. Thank you.